It is Thursday, Yud Aleph of Menachem of Tavshin Daled. We are in Teres Menachem, Sefer Mamar Tavshin Yud Aleph Tavshin Yud Beis. In the Mamar of Yom Beis, the Chag Shavuos Tavshin Yud Beis, Dibra Maschel B'Shor Shehikdimu. We are on page Shin Vov. And we are up to V'Yiseirim is it, yeah? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines from the bottom of the paragraph V'Hadugma. The line starts Hamayim, up to the full stop V'Yiseirim is it. The Rebbe is explaining the difference between Igulim and Yosher, the circles and the lines, the revelation of godliness which is transcendental and the revelation of godliness which is immanent. And the Rebbe explains that even the Igulim aspect, which is from the Ein Sof Shalifnei HaTzimtzum, from the godly infinite light before the contraction, it comes via the contraction. Right? It's carried by the Kav via the contraction into Eilamis. But it remains Igulim. It remains transcendental. The Rebbe explains that there is also, similar to this, we find that actually in creatures down here below. It's the difference between the creatures that live in the sea creatures, and land creatures.
Isn't that the same with the other? It also comes from everything comes from the full one. They're all attracted to the periphery.
But one is b'derech maiver and one is b'derech islapshus. One takes on the trappings, the characteristics of the tzimtzum. That's why there's this chalkus, that's why there's fragmentation, and that's why there's pedimia, and so on and so forth. The idea being that it reckons with, so to speak, the created being, whereas the igulim remains in its, generally speaking, I was going to explain there are different nuances, but generally speaking, it remains in its original state. It's just carried from before the tzimtzum, through the tzimtzum, into Eilamis. And that finds expression in the different types of creatures that exist. There are land creatures and sea creatures. In land creatures, the Rebbe says there is this chalkos, this fragmentation. The right, the left, the middle. There's obvious fragmentation. It's very, it's stark. It's right there. Whereas when we talk about sea creatures, there is no fragmentation. Right? So in other words, he starts talking first about the actual... Hang on. First he's talking about land and sea. And then he's talking about the land creatures and the sea creatures. Right? So the fragmentation in land, in the earth, is a lot more obvious and visible. It hits you right there. You see immediately you see differences. Whereas when you look at the sea, what? You have trees, you have grass, you have people, you have animals. You see it right in front of you.
You have the same under the water.
You do, but it's concealed. That's the idea. It's concealed. It's concealed. So that's the idea. The difference between his chalkus, fragmentation, and otherwise. So he says like this. So in the land you have fragmentation, whereas in water there's no fragmentation. Look at the water; it all looks the same, so to speak. And he says, even though in the water you have the difference between the upper waters and the lower waters, as it says in Chumash Bereshis, that Hashem separated the upper waters from the lower waters, right? Nevertheless, the Rebbe says they're both water. It's just that one set of water, so to speak, one part of the water is up and one part of the water is down. Later on, the Rebbe is going to explain that there are differences in the two waters also. But generally speaking, if you look at it, what's the difference between this water and that water? They're both waters, just this water is here and this water is there. So the fragmentation is a lot less, as it were, than on the land. V'Yiseirim says the Rebbe. Shegam habruim shebemayim. Now he goes on and he speaks about the creatures that live in the water, right? Also the creatures that live in the water, shemachulakim zamizah, as Kevin says, where the creatures are different one from another. B'dmusam, b'tzalmon, b'tchunasam, or b'tavnisam. The difference in their form, in their image, in their characteristics, in their appearance, right? So they are different. Hareim shavim bazeh. Nevertheless, they are all equal in the sense that that their existence is the existence of water. They exist from the water. Therefore, as soon as they are removed from the water, they immediately die. This is a quote from the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara over there says, what is the comparison between people? Because the Gemara over there brings a posik where people are compared to sea creatures. Why? So he says, just like sea creatures depend totally and always on the water, and as soon as they are removed from the water, they die. So too a Yid who's removed from Torah and Mitzvahs, the connection between Yid and Torah and Mitzvahs is the same. Then he also brings over here from the Gemara in Brachos. If you look at the footnote, there's a reference to the Gemara in Brachos. There's the famous story over there in Gemara in Brachos with Rabbi Akiva and a man called Popos. Right? Rabbi Akiva, even though the Romans made a decree that Yidden shouldn't learn Torah, Rabbi Akiva went ahead and he gathered Yidden together and he spread Torah. So he says, you're not afraid that you're going to be captured? Over there it says, that you have to, quotes the pasuk in Kriyas Shema. And as an example of B'chol Nafshecha, he tells the story of Rabbi Akiva, who even in defiance of the Roman decree, he went ahead and he learned Torah anyway. And Papa said to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not afraid? This is Rabbi Akiva. He said, you're not afraid? So Rabbi Akiva said, Moshel Lamad Avadayma. He brings us the famous parable of the fox who saw the fish in the water rushing from one spot to another spot. He says, what are you rushing about? He says, we're afraid of the nets that the humans are throwing in to the water. We're going to get caught. So the fox says to the fish, why don't you come out and land onto the land and live with me? We'll live happily together. He says, so the fish say to him, you are the one that is considered the cleverest of the animals. You're a fool, he says. If in our source of life we're afraid that we might get caught and die, how much more so if we go onto the dry land? So to say Rebbe Akiva, you got to spread Torah. Anyway, it goes on that the Romans caught them both, and then Papa's lamented. He says, Rebbe Akiva, lucky are you that you got caught for spreading Torah, and woe unto me, Papa said that I got caught for Dvarim B'Telim. Anyway, so the bottom line is that the connection between sea creatures and the water is very, very strong. It's very much connected to their being in existence. Whereas when you talk on land creatures, if you talk about land creatures, it also depends on oxygen, I guess. However, there are different elements on the land, more obvious, right, where the connection with the oxygen, there's levels, right? There are a lot more obvious levels.
Like it goes with the sea.
But it's less.
No oxygen down the bottom.
But he's saying. Yeah, but he's saying that it's a lot less obvious. Generally speaking, when we talk about the difference between land and the sea, is when we talk about
marshal, so you can't take it. Once you start
taking it literally,
it breaks down.
Yeah, so we're talking about generally. You're saying, Eretz is Alma de Isgalia, land is Alma de Iskasia. So it's a physical image in this world of a manifestation of a good illumination. Okay. Why indeed do we find these differences between land and water? Because this is the point. Land is rooted in the aspect of Yesher, the immanent, the line of godliness, which means to say the Pnimi, right? That's why the fragmentation exists in land, obvious fragmentation. Water is rooted in the aspect of Igulim, the transcendental aspects of godliness, which means to say that even when it descends down here below, its essence isn't changed. Therefore, therefore also in creatures who are rooted in the aspects of Igulim, of the transcendental aspects of godliness, we find this aspect, that they are one entity, one existence, which is beyond fragmentation. The bottom line is that in Igulim there is no fragmentation, in Yesher there is fragmentation, and it's a direct result of the type of godliness, godly revelation that it is. This is transcendental, and this is immanent and Pnimi and Yesher. So this is generally speaking. However, says the Rebbe Omnam, chapter 6, Vov, Omnam, however, Gam b'bchinas Igulim, shenimshechu b'bchinas Igul HaGadol derech ma'aver hatzimtzum b'vad, even in the aspect of the transcendental levels of godliness that were drawn down from the great big ball of Ein Sof, right, from before the Tzimtzum, and they were drawn down through the passage of the Tzimtzum, right, only in a passing through manner, as just explained. And in brackets, the Rebbe says, and it's because of that, because they only pass through, because the Igulim only pass through the Tzimtzum, that they don't take on the characteristics of the Tzimtzum. It still remains transcendental and endless, right? Nevertheless, because they were, at the end of the day, they do come down through the passage of the Tzimtzum, irrespective of the fact that what? That it's only passing through. There is some aspect in them of the Tzimtzum, and the Rebbe will explain how. So in other words, you cannot compare the Igulim, which have passed through the Tzimtzum and come down into worlds, into realms, after the Tzimtzum, relative to that Igulim as it is before the Tzimtzum. The transcendental element of this godly energy is more, let's put it this way, is more transcendental prior to going through the Tzimtzum than going through the Tzimtzum. Then after going through the Tzimtzum. So the Rebbe explains like this. V'yesh leimar. The Rebbe starts articulating. Sheyesh beis madreges b'igulim. There are two levels in the transcendental elements of godliness. Madrege ha'alef shebo his gabrus b'chinas ein sof. Level one is a level of igulim in which the infinite, the endless aspect is more powerful, overpowers. Umadrege ha'beis shebo his gabrus b'chinas tzimtzum. And the second level of igulim is where the more powerful and pronounced aspect is the tzimtzum aspect. What's the pshat? Says the Rebbe. This is the difference between the upper waters and the lower waters. So it's not only that the upper waters and the lower waters are exactly the same. It's just this is upper and this is lower. This is a separation. So the Rebbe says, no, there's a difference. Because as mentioned before, generally speaking, when we speak about water, this is the mode, this is the aspect of what? Of the igulim, the transcendental aspects of godliness. But when we talk about the upper waters, we talk about a level of waters, which is the higher level in the transcendental aspects of godliness, which means shebohi is gabrus b'chinas ein sof, in which what is more pronounced and what is more powerful is the infinite aspect of the Ein Sof, of this godly energy. When we talk about the lower waters, we're talking about a lower level in Igulim, in which what is more pronounced and more powerful is the Tzimtzum aspect of the transcendental godly energy. The Rebbe is going to flesh it out even further to explain the difference between Malochim, Neshamis, Spheres, Hecholis, where you see degrees, shades, as it were, in Ein Sof. And we'll continue Mitzvah tomorrow.